Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're welcoming back Chandler Copenhaver, who has recently started a small business consultancy firm called What to Fund. Chandler, welcome back to the binge, my friend. How you doing?
We're good, James. Thanks for having me back.
It is awesome having you back. Now, for those in the audience that are saying, what to fund? I thought this was the backer kit guy. What's going on? I thought, you know what? This is a great chance to get you back on the podcast. You have been on a couple episodes in the past. I refer to you pretty much weekly on this podcast when we do episodes. There'll often be an antidote or something we're talking about. And I'll be like, yeah, well, Chandler suggested this from Backer Kit, and you've been a good mentor over the years, so I want to thank you for that. And I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of really talk to you, because I want to learn, because we haven't had a chance to talk about it, and have the audience hear about kind of what you're working on now and kind of where you're going and what happened. You used to be the Backer Kit guy. Where are you now?
Yeah. I had a lot of change for me lately, including the beard. Yeah, I have made a lot of changes in the last 3 or 4 months. Had a really exciting time working at Backer Kit and CrowdOx before that. In fact, you had me on back in the old
That's right.
Old days for CrowdOx as well. And I've been I had a really good experience working in the crowdfunding space, working with Backer Kit, working within the Kickstarter and crowdfunding sphere, and had a series of things happen that kind of brought me back to my center, if you will. I had, and I think this is an experience that a lot of entrepreneurs have. A lot of people that are like kind of coming back to some of the core things that are important to them, sort of their values.
Yeah.
I had something similar happen with me. I was having a good time working with Backer Kit, and we can go into some of the things I was doing there and how they're doing. But I had some experiences sort of drove me kind of to really, I guess, if you will,
soul search or
introspective. Yeah, a little soul searching, and realized there were some things that I had sort of left on the table about a decade ago. So I started into crowdfunding back in 2015, and had started working with entrepreneurs, working kind of in this space. I started doing some consulting back then, and then, but also was working heavily for a couple of different organizations, and had a great time with it. Focused a lot on marketing, so like advertising the campaigns. I did that back in 2015 with a company called Funded Today, and worked with them for a couple of years. Only about 2 years, actually, 2.5 years, and things were pretty good at the beginning, and then sort of went weird. They're struggling. I don't know if they're even around anymore, actually. They sort of went a different path, and that back to values. I had sort of a set of values that were important to me, and so I kind of strayed away from that, and then ended up connecting with the guys who created CrowdOx. Nathan and Aaron, who are stand-up guys, stand-up gentlemen, and they had a great product. And so I'm like, this is something I get behind, and was excited to help grow.
It was a fantastic product, just by the way. I want to interject because I used CrowdOx, and it was great.
Yeah, it was great, and it was also a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I came on with these guys. They're brilliant. Like some of the most creative and very, what's a good way to put it? Like they had a sort of a good vision, especially from a UI perspective, unlike anything I'd worked with before.
Yeah.
And so I was really thrilled to work with them. At first, though we had a lot of challenges to confront because we were the new guys in the space. We were, I think we had done $60,000 a year in revenue for the first 2 years, and that's not sustainable for 2 guys, let alone 3 guys.
It's not sustainable
right?
for 1 guy. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right, exactly. And so it was very much a side hustle, but I knew it could be more. So I jumped on. We went from 60,000 those first 2 years to we did 600,000 the first year that I was on, and then kind of grew from there. And we grew pretty substantially. I was kind of in the business development or sales seat. Was doing a lot of the selling and engaging with creators and our customers, but was also kind of figuring out how do we kind of grow as a company and unpack that. So really starting at the ground level, and that was a lot of fun to me. I really enjoy that that startup experience. And then we did that for a couple of years, grew substantially, and then got to a place where, in fact, it got to a really interesting spot. So both of the co-founders, they both had a desire to really focus in on their skill set, which was development.
Yeah.
But when you're running a company, turns out you can't do that as much as you want to focus on it, because you got to do the other things of running a company. And I think that's actually a shared experience of people who decide to, start a company. Maybe they're a hobbyist and they want to start a board game company, right? They want to go create board games. It's like, I want to make board games. And it turns out the percentage of time that you actually are creating and or are playing board games or, kind of involved with that part turns out to be smaller than you expect, right? Because you end up spending so much time doing the business creation side and doing all of the other activities that are related to that, manufacturing and fulfillment, which I know you've gone through and also shared quite a bit on your podcast. But we kind of went through that from they went through that from like a developer standpoint. Like, we want to develop products, and we created a great one, but now we have to like run a company. And so they kind of came to this decision point in 2020. That BackerKit approached. BackerKit was the big competitor, right? I competed against BackerKit, which it was a fairly competitive space, and I was doing pretty well in my competition there. And we competed against BackerKit in terms of the pledge management softwares, CrowdOx being one of them. And then that went really well. But BackerKit reached out and said, "Hey, let's join forces and let's kind of combine our experience and our softwares," and we did. So we decided to join forces. We sold our company to BackerKit. I joined on as an employee, and so did actually all of the CrowdOx employees except for I think one person or something that was just a part-timer. And then we stayed on. I was there for about 4 years after joining BackerKit, and had a good experience. And
I think it probably made it better too, right? Like if I think back to kind of my interaction with BackerKit prior to that, and again, no disservice to them, but then working with CrowdOx, and then when after the merge, and then you convinced me, said, "Hey, give BackerKit, we've brought our team over, and let's try to give BackerKit a chance." And I think if I look at companies that acquire another company, usually the cultural mesh does not work out. Usually one side is going to fade away, and the dominant side and it's usually the acquirer will continue on. And this is a case example of where it really seemed to be a really good blend, quite frankly, of the two companies. And I mean, they are awesome to work with, right? And I just want to put that out there. The BackerKit is great. Everything from their pledge management to their marketing services they have to their kind of pre-marketing services they have, where you can, if you're not using their platform, you can still, for a small fee, almost use them like a MailChimp, right? And that data stays and carries over from campaign to campaign. It is an amazing tool. And that's not even getting into I know they're now into the crowdfunding side too, which I haven't dabbled in, but there are other tools I'm a big fan of, and I can see them going they're going in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, I think this is why we were open to that merger, that join together, because there were a lot of shared values. We were kind of headed in a similar direction in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. And so when we joined up together, I mean, we had a really good time. I had a really good experience, joining onto the team. We see, and I come from a sort of a position where I do try to make decisions based on values. I kind of mentioned that already. And at the time, I can't sell something. I can't talk to somebody about something that I don't believe in, that I don't think is actually going to serve the people that I'm talking to. And so that was very much the case. I did believe that they, that it would be something really great. And yeah, it was. We ended up, introducing a bunch of new services. BackerKit got heavily in an area I focused on significantly is the pre-launch marketing
Yeah.
to really help people build their audiences and kind of grow and prepare themselves for crowdfunding, because most people, it's kind of an area that I have always focused on with a lot of the work that I've done, the private consulting that I've did. So all along the way of doing all of these things, I've always worked with individual creators. I've run some campaigns with some buddies. Together we've done some projects. I've done a lot of one-on-one consulting over the years, just as a kind of a side thing, and my whole focus has always been on kind of that part of it, especially, which is like, how do we prepare? How do we really build a solid foundation to go out and succeed in the marketplace? And so that's something that I was really thrilled that we were able to lean into with BackerKit. We did a lot of pre-launch advertising that was incredibly successful. Yeah, the team was able to put together some new tools and some new features that really helped that. And it's funny because there was really only one of two paths for BackerKit. There was kind of a path which was, it wasn't a growth path, which is kind of continue what we're doing today.
Yeah.
And which is a lot of things, the pledge manager, the pre-launch advertising, the live advertising, the post-campaign pledge management experience, and kind of all that encompasses that. But there's like that missing centerpiece, the actual crowdfunding. And it was really difficult because Kickstarter had a tendency to, that was our main platform. But this is true for any of us running businesses. If you have one vendor to rely upon,
yeah,
that if you're strapped to one vendor and they make choices, you're kind of stuck. You're in a bad place. You want to have options. You want to have the ability to sort of control your destiny. And when you're a company that basically is designed, because like BackerKit only existed. There's a fun thing I would always say is like, BackerKit only existed because Kickstarter chose not to provide certain things. And they Kickstarter made very like conscious choices, like we don't do this part and we don't do that part, right? So they made that choice for years. In fact, for a decade, these are things they chose not to do. And so BackerKit became kind of the custodian in some way of Kickstarter. Same with CrowdOx. Like these companies came in to basically solve for these missing pieces that Kickstarter simply chose not to do. And so I would always say like we basically are the janitor, like plunging toilets and like fixing light bulbs and stuff, like just kind of solving for some of the unsexy part of that experience. Because like when you're raising the money, that's fun, that's exciting, that there's a lot of energy behind that. But when you're dealing with fulfillment, when you're dealing with advertising and things like that, that part can be kind of hard and not fun as a creator. And so BackerKit got to come in and do that in a great way. But then finally came to the conclusion, and it was actually funny. I was there with Maxwell, the founder of BackerKit, on a couple of these pretty important calls where like the decision was finally made, like, what, we actually should consider building our own crowdfunding. It was not like part of the grand design initially. Like when CrowdOx and BackerKit merged, it was like a thing that could happen one day, but it was not something that we imagined would be something we'd do in the short term. And it very quickly became a let's do this, and let's do this now. Kickstarter was dropping a lot of balls. There was a lot of problems back in the what was happening.
The rise of GameFound at the same time too, right?
GameFound was doing really well, but then what was it the Kickstarter did? There was the
crypto.
The crypto thing.
Announced they're doing the crypto. Yeah,
that's right. The crypto thing started happening. Everyone was confused. It was a PR nightmare.
Yeah.
But it was also like a lot of people were legitimately concerned. Like, I don't know if I can align myself with sort of this path.
Yeah.
And BackerKit stepped in and said, well, we'll make crowdfunding and we'll do it, within a matter of 3 months, built ground up a completely new code stack to support crowdfunding. And that by itself is a pretty, hats off to the software team with BackerKit. Like they did some really cool stuff. And not only were to build it really quickly, but like efficiently, so that it's a pretty stable software. And, later it was able to host massive campaigns,
Yeah.
including Frosthaven, including the Frosthaven and Gloomhaven sort of big expansion, including like Brandon Sanderson launched his massive campaign on their platform. So they've done some really cool stuff, and I was thrilled. I was kind of at the high of everything. Things were going really well. You know, I had very much a kind of a premier spot within the company, and had opportunities to continue to grow there. I think I could have stepped into some, maybe a leadership positions or done some other things in the long term. But in this soul searching that I described, this kind of coming back to my center, I realized that there were some things I'd left on the table a decade before, before I got into the crowdfunding, and there was some things I felt really called to step into. And so yeah, I made a very conscious decision. Like I need to kind of quit and cut ties. There's nothing really driving that from the backer kit side as much as it was there was a need to kind of go this other way. And it's a shared experience with those that are creating companies, that are starting new companies. There's a shared experience with that, where it's like you get to a place where you realize, hey, I'm getting older, I'm getting further down this path, I'm farther away from what I felt like, maybe because a lot of us sometimes have like big dreams when we're young.
Yeah.
And we're teenagers or something, and you're kind of thinking about, what do I want to do with my life? And then kind of you end up striding. Your path often diverges differently than you anticipate.
I think I was going to say, just add on that. The other,
yeah.
Thing I would say is that as an entrepreneur, there's different skill sets, right? And entrepreneurship is a very unique skill set, right? So people that are willing to create things, build things from nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Not everyone can do that. But on top of that, running things that are stable and kind of doing your kind of marginal growth each year and things like that, that's a skill set that doesn't necessarily align with the entrepreneur, right? Mm-hmm. And if you talk to, a lot of colleagues I have who like to build things and are entrepreneurs and so forth, the idea of being in a big company where they're in a management role day to day, managing people and, working on, okay, how do we increase our growth by 5% next year? Like, that's their idea of hell, right?
It's draining.
They need to create, and they constantly need to build new things, right? They're builders. They're the ones getting out the Legos and building something new, then breaking it down and building another new thing. So I can totally relate with this, that, often as an entrepreneur, it's tough to think of, okay, once I build this thing, what comes after that? Because if it's running that thing, I'm not sure I want to do that. Right. I want to go build something else.
No, you're 100% right. And I think that's kind of why I try to create like a connection to what I'm describing as not just something that the entrepreneur experiences, right? I think it's an experience that all of us can have, no matter where we are in our particular path, where we might come to a, decision point where it's like, there's that thing I always wanted to do and I never did it, or I'm doing in a world that I didn't ever anticipate. And from my perspective specifically, I just wasn't challenged in the way that I'd like to be challenged. Growing CrowdOx was really challenging, and there was a lot of fun in that challenge. There's a lot of reward in that challenge. It's something that I have always enjoyed. And even doing, joining BackerKit, we had a lot of challenges in the early stages of, transitioning. Like, I wasn't an entrepreneur at this stage, but I was challenged by I was an employee for the first time in a long time. And I was like, this is fun though, because I get to like help BackerKit grow, like transition all these people from CrowdOx to BackerKit, and then go from, what we were doing to opening up new service lanes and completely different distribution channels with the crowdfunding, running that specifically. So that to me was really challenging and fun and exciting. And so I guess you could say, like, I got to a place where I was, like you actually started to describe, which is like things kind of stabled out, and I was like, I need to do some other things. But anyway, so I quit, and I'm not gone completely. Like the board game space, I mean, there's a bunch of games behind me. For me, it's like deeply ingrained, and so is small business. Like there was a period where I thought I might be completely done. Like, okay, I'm going to leave this chapter altogether. what I'm actually working on right now, my main focus, my number one focus, is I'm actually creating a nonprofit organization. So I'm
Oh wow.
working to build a 501c3 nonprofit that's really focused on helping middle class, middle income families that are going through hardship, to help them recover from the challenges they're going through, to find community and support and resources. And there's just not a lot. Like if you're kind of in that, which most of us are kind of in this middle class segment.
Yeah.
Middle class is pretty big, like in, at least for US dollars, that's like making 50 to $200,000 and in that range, right? It's kind of this massive range that facilitates most people. And if you go through something difficult, there's not something to support you in that process. There's not a lot, right? There's, if you're like low income and you're below the poverty line, there's government resources, and there's all these organizations that are focused on that. When I was growing up, my parents struggled, and we went from sort of being a middle class family to like slipping backwards into poverty, and like
Yeah.
that happened throughout my teenage years. And I look back and I remember, like, there's, like, it didn't have to have happened that way. It didn't have to have become this situation where over a 10-year span we went to, became, slipped backwards into poverty. And so that's a really big interest to me, of the, how do we help, especially over the next 10 years. I think we're going to really experience even harder times than we're experiencing now. Like, it's just going to continue on a downward cycle, unfortunately. And so I think there's going to be a significant need for figuring, basically problem solving, like creating solutions for people, much of which, by the way, is in the entrepreneurial sphere. Like, what do you do if you need to make that extra $700, $300 a month? Well, you go out and you make more money. Like, you have to figure out ways to, make more money, and, fund these things. You got to fund your kids' education, or their extracurricular things. Like, you can't take away gymnastics classes. I have 4 kids, well, 3, one on the way.
Yeah.
And you can't just, like, all of a sudden decide not to do certain things in your life just because something's difficult, something's happening in your life. And so what do you do? Like, how do you find a way through that experience? And so that's what I'm focusing on, like, with most of my energy, is creating this organization. And part of my past, before I jumped into crowdfunding, before I was working kind of in this world, I worked for some nonprofits, and then I also ran a youth program, and called Kaishi. And so Kaishi is something that I'm also getting back into. This is actually the turning point, and what made these decisions is I realized I taught this program, and it was a really great experience. It was a character education curriculum, kind of focused on the samurai. Like, we taught kids how to become samurai, right? That was like the whole premise of the program. And how do you face and confront life when life really is kind of like a battle? Like, you do kind of have to be a warrior and have a warrior mindset to, like, approach the challenges of life. And so we took a lot of that in a curriculum, and taught this to a whole bunch of I taught it to a whole bunch of teenagers and children, way back in like 2013, 14, early 15. And I had a lot of fun with it. But the reason why I stopped doing that back then is because I had a baby, right? So I had a kid. My wife quit her job. I didn't know how to make that a sustainable income for me back then. And I needed to make money kind of quickly and short term. And that sort of took me on this path that I'm on now. And I realized later, I was going through this moment of, like, regret, I suppose. Like, I wasn't regretting the 10 years, but I was regretting, like, if I don't make changes now, I will have taught this program to a whole bunch of strangers' children, but not my own, because I now have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, right? And one on the way. And so I have my own kids that I really wanted to. So that's why I say a lot of this is bringing me back to center, to, like, some of the values that I have, some of the things that I want to accomplish, those visions or those dreams, right? And I realized, like, there was only one way for me to jump into these things, and that's, I can't half-ass it. I gotta, like, full blown, attack these things. And so I decided I needed to make that jump and quit, and look to build these these organizations. And it's funny because the main thing that I'm kind of promoting or talking about here, as far as what I'm working on, isn't those two things, right?
It's what
The
to
third
fund.
thing,
Yeah.
yeah, the third thing, the what to fund is sort of this. It's a combination of this last decade that I've done working with people. I think I was doing the math. I was trying to add it up of all of the customers I've ever had with CrowdOx, with Funded Today, with BackerKit. The number of people, somewhere in the ballpark of like 4,000 people that I've had the benefit to be able to work with and support their crowdfunding, help them with their visions, their dreams. And if you've worked with me before, like, that, like, even if I was trying to, encourage that you use BackerKit's advertising service, like, that's not how I approached. Like, I wasn't just a sales guy, right? Like, I would jump in and we would kind of,
Yeah.
get our heads together and figure out, like, problem solve and figure out how to solve, challenges that the people I was working with, um, they were dealing with their project or their company or their employees, or especially their crowdfunding campaigns. And then, like, as I said, I'd been doing consulting, but I'd never really focused on it as sort of my core. I never really kind of provided it as like a service in that sense. A lot of it was word of mouth. A lot of it was, I'd work with this guy and he introduced me to this person. And
Yeah.
so I never really kind of marketed that service. So what I'm doing right now is taking about 30% of my time, spending about 30% of my time, because like I said, I'm building these other things. A lot of it's really local, like local to me.
Sure.
And I'm in Utah. And so, but I wanted to be able to, help people still. I have all this experience, all of the, these years that I've spent leaning into crowdfunding and just business development in general. And so the What to Fund company, I started that in 2017, and it was more or less, like I said, just sort of this word of mouth thing. But I'm now leaning into it. I have a bunch of clients I'm working with to help them on their creative journey. So whether they're the actual entrepreneur, creating a company, which that is definitely my main focus, but I am working with quite a couple of people that are, they're working in their particular jobs. They want to side hustle a bit. They want to, they've always wanted to design that board game, but they never, they never sort of like leaned into it. And I think it's really where I'm finding my center on all of these things is helping people kind of uncover their passions and their dreams, even if that doesn't necessarily mean starting a company, right? Even if that is, how do I, maybe I want to work in a particular industry that I'm not working in today. You know? Maybe I want to work in the board game industry, even if I'm not creating a company. I want to go and I want to like live as a part of my passion somehow. So I'm doing some coaching like that. That's coaching people through kind of figuring out their values and their dreams
path,
and try to, their path. And then I'm doing some consulting, working with companies to kind of really get to the nuts and bolts and gears of how systems work and processes work in their organizations, and having a really fun time doing it.
So that consulting, is that then obviously it's not obvious, but it sounds like it's helping people get into small business, not necessarily in the board game industry, but inclusive of board games. Is that a fair way to say it?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Board games is a really beautiful like intersection of business and passion, right? Like it is, I mean, this is how you got to where you're at right now. It's like you have this huge amount of passion and interest. Board games by themselves is really fascinating, right? Because if you look at like what a board game actually is and represents, it represents challenge that I willingly accept, right? Like I'm willingly sitting down in front of a game and accepting that I might lose to my opponent. I don't know how like I'm going to make the decisions I'm going to make. Like, some of the best games have many decisions, right? A lot of us, especially kind of from this industry, really love some of the strategy games and deeper kind of decision making. You're either getting into games for a love and a passion of that side of things, or for the human interaction, like interacting with other people and sitting face to face and really, enjoying sort of that. Because I mean, especially we've gone so digital. Like, board games does one thing extremely well, which is like gets you down and focused with people, right? And so if you have a love and a passion for those two things, you're willingly accepting and confronting hard challenges, there's a lot that kind of pairs with that with business, actually.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why, like, chess was like still is one of the go-to things that people will think of when it's like determining strategy, thinking ahead and for the long term, and planning different paths forward, as you do in a game like chess. But there's so much passion that comes from this group of people that are, a lot of us start out as enthusiasts and playing the games, loving to play the games, and that can translate into, well, what if I created a game, and what if I, what would it take for me to create this game, and then if I've created this game, am I gonna sell it? Am I gonna create my own company? Because that's a path, that's a journey. It's one you've taken.
Yep.
There's a whole nother path and a journey, which is like, I'm gonna create games and I'm going to partner with other companies, or sell my game to a company. There's actually a lot of paths to success, and so one of the in fact, it was something that was taught to me by a mentor, but they kept asking this question as I'm kind of figuring out myself. This was about 7 years ago, but so I was figuring out what I was going to do with different things. It's like, well, figure out what your win condition is first, right? If I can figure out what my win condition is, then I can sort of align with what that path is and where it's going to take me. Some of the best board game teachers, people that are teaching a game, they'll start with that, right? They kind of help you figure out, okay, well, this is how you win the game. Yeah. Now let me teach you how to play the game, right? And so when you look at life from that same angle, that perspective, it changes how you approach things, because it's like, well, what am I actually after? Do I want to create a company? Maybe not. Maybe I just want to create games. Maybe that's fulfilling enough, or maybe I just
want to be involved in the industry even, right?
Yeah, maybe I just want to be a part of this space and engage with people that are like-minded and are also interested. So yeah, it really kind of comes down to that win condition. I think all of us have to figure that out, and that's at the core of where I'm at.
So how does someone engage? So I'm going to put in the show notes a link to your, and I'm showing here on screen for those who are following. There's a private Facebook group you've created, which is called What to Fund, appropriately named, obviously. And in there's lots of like anecdotes or short videos I see that you're posting, giving people advice on all sorts of things. So I would encourage people to join. It's a private Facebook group, so you have to like click on the link and ask to join, and then Chandler will let you in. That's mainly to keep the bots out and to keep the community as a community, because sometimes we leave these things public, it just becomes a free-for-all. But if somebody wants to engage you at What to Fund, like how do they go about that? Like, say there's an individual that's like, you know what, I think I could probably use this guy's experience to help me on my journey. What does that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, for right now, that's definitely one of the best ways to engage. I'm doing this Facebook group's purpose is really just build some community. We need to be able to rally together and encourage and support each other, because it is challenging. No matter where you are in that stage, you might have been running your company for 10 years. It can be incredibly challenging still. You still are faced with, daily problems, and it doesn't really matter where you are in that process. So we have this group, just really reactivating it right now, and people can join that. Just accept the invitation, and then I'll introduce you into the group, and we'll be communicating there. I'm doing a weekly live stream. We're gonna every Tuesday at 2. What to fund Tuesday at 2. I'm trying to do this, just a conversation, get together and talk through things that people are going through. Maybe kind of. I didn't think I'd be doing podcasting, but turns out I might do a little bit of that. So I have to learn from the master here.
Well, maybe we'll get you on as the guest host or the Board Game Binge. I'd love to have you as a guest host.
Yeah, no, that'll be a lot of fun. So, but yeah, that's kind of the main thing. I do have a website that's almost revamped and finished again, so that way it'd be a little bit easier for people to say, hey, raise their hand. I'm interested in some support, some help, whether it's figuring out the path and the vision from the coaching side, or whether it's the nuts and bolts of business development and crowdfunding and any of those pieces. So, people can always reach out to me on Facebook, just directly, private message type thing as well. But yeah, it's pretty excited about being able to help from that perspective, because I don't want to let it go to waste. I've had so many experiences.
Yeah.
And so how do I help people in their journey? And that's something that I'm not only passionate about, but very versed in doing. So.
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I've learned something every single time you and I are having a conversation. I always walk away with like a little notepad and something notes I jot down, and it's that accumulation of experiences that then you can pass on to others. So for those, again, I'm gonna put in the show notes for those who want to check out the Facebook group. It's called What to Fund. 2 is actually the number 2. I'll put a link in the show notes so it's easy for people to find. It's cool to be part of this at the ground floor of this. I think it's awesome. For me, I get excited by that because it allows you then to actually have direct interaction with everybody that's part of this process before it gets too big, right? And you feel like, I'm just part of the outside group. So I'd encourage people to check it out. I will put a link in the show notes. And I'll be checking out your weekly lives and see what other information I can scoop up. Chandler, I want to wish you all the best with this endeavor, man. I'm so excited for you. I'm glad to see you following your bliss and following your path, and I think you're going to be incredibly successful with this.
I appreciate it, James. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. And I've been excited and very much appreciative of your effort to try to open the industry, open people's minds and hearts to different things over the years. So continue doing what you're doing too. It's awesome.
Oh, thanks a lot, pal. You take care, man. Cheers.
All right, appreciate it.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.